All right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for attending our monthly webinar on downtown rapid transit, the first rapid transit system outside of the metro in Minnesota. If you've been joining us regularly on these monthly sessions, you've seen us talk quite a lot about different subjects. And today, we're going to be talking about station architecture and platform stationing. I know many people have been asking a lot of questions about what will the stations look like, how will they be different or the same as the station in my background and the ones currently on 2nd Street. And so we're gonna kind of give you a look and talk you through some of that today. With that, thank you. As usual, you can submit your questions in 2 different ways. The first one is you can use the Q&A box and submit your question anytime, and we will answer a few of those via text and submit those out to everybody. And a few of them we're going to hold open for. We might hold over for sessions in which we will pause once kind of towards the middle and once at the end to take questions live. During that live session, you can, or if you wish to, you can always raise your hand, use the raise your hand feature. And then when we come to those pauses or those question and answer session breaks, our host, Alicia, we will identify you and we will unmute you. So it's a little bit of a process, but once we unmute you, then you could go ahead and ask your question live over air, and we'll treat that a little bit like folks on the radio. Again, many of you saw the recording has started. All these recordings do get added to the project webpage, www.rochestermm.gov/rapid transit. And you can find all of our previous sessions on traffic and all sorts of other issues coming up on that page. With that, if you have any questions, you can always email Alicia with the SRF consulting link that you see on your page if you have some questions during the session or some trouble. Walking through the agenda real quickly, I will take a few minutes to do a quick overview of downtown rapid transit, set the basics and background, and then I'll hand it off to Amarama Vernuk, who was one of our co-designers, and they will talk through the stations and the involvement that the co-designers did have in the process. And then we will largely hand it off to Nathan Johnson of Formula Architecture, who is our lead architect on the design of our stations. We will take a quick break after a few minutes of Nathan talking, and then at the end, we will come back for questions. With that, I think we can go ahead and move forward. So in real quickly, again, downtown rapid transit is roughly a 2.6 mile route extending from the West Transit Village to the Civic Center and Government Center, mostly following along 2nd Street. There are 7 stations or 11 platforms. Some of those stations will have access to go eastbound and westbound, and a few will only have the one station to go one direction. The service that we're talking about offering would be a bus would arrive at one of these stations every 5 minutes during the peak morning and afternoon rush hours, and then 10 to 15 minutes in the off peak. It'll take you roughly 15 minutes to get from one end to the other. We expect 11,000 riders the day we open in the spring of 2025. We're talking about having expanded service hours than are typically offered by RPT, and with a total cost estimate, project capital cost estimate over 114 million, with roughly a $2.8 million annual operating cost. Next, we'll be able to see a map, and we'll see that that route mainly, like I said, on 2nd Street, starting out at the West Transit Village, which is currently Mayo's West parking lot out there by Cascade Lake Park. And that will be the western end, and then proceed down 2nd Street all the way until you hit the Civic Center and 3rd Avenue. Then you would take a right-hand turn on 3rd Avenue, followed by another right-hand turn onto 4th Street, and then you would hit the Government Center, followed by another right-hand turn onto Broadway to head back west out towards the Mayo campus and the West Transit Village, back onto with a left-hand turn back on 2nd Street. So think of it, that loop on the eastern end, we'll be going around that clockwise. All right. One last thing before I hand it off here, talking about the schedule. Once again, we hope to have service open and operating for you to ride on in the spring of 2025. Working backwards, that means a large part of the construction that's needed, including the construction of the stations, will primarily be done in the year 2024. We do expect and hope that we can start some minor work in 2023. But we will, that will be correspond to when we receive roughly 49% for the project cost from the Federal Transit Administration. So right now in 2021, we're going through both the environmental phase and the some early design phases, including some basic station architecture that you'll see here today. And we'll conclude a lot of that design next year. With that, I will hand it off to Amarama, and they will talk through the co-design process. Amarama.
Well, hello, everyone. Thank you for coming today, and thank you for this opportunity. So I've had a lot of fun, and it's been a real honor to be a part of this process. And basically, a lot of us, we had applied for and juried in for this. I was especially interested in the co-design process for a number of reasons, one of which I personally live a couple blocks away from where the proposed 2nd Street, 19th Avenue station would be. I also have 3 children, so what the future has in mind is really, really important for myself and future generations going forward long term in the terms of transportation and how that impacts the environment. So those were some of the reasons why I wanted to sign on. And also I'm a known artist in the community professionally, and I really wanted to help support the design process with this and pushing forward for local artists. So when working on this, it had a diverse amount of input and background from our various representatives on the team. As you can see up here, we had 10 diverse residents of a diverse backgrounds and experiences here in Rochester. And it was very much a collaborative process between all of the Rochester-based residents and staff and the community members consulting, and also with the designing and the planners. So basically, one of our main goals was to help broaden the range of the voices and lived experiences of those who would be using this wonderful and established design. So we worked with a lot of different design principles and shaping concepts. Basically, our main goal was to help create a design that really was reflective of the communities that were involved and the different residences as well. And then do I flip to the next page or oh, sorry. Thanks for your patience there. I'm still new at this part. So a lot of the community perspectives, a lot of us as within the co-design team also reached out to folks within our communities and would get feedback and input. So from the community perspectives, we highlighted a lot of the key community destinations. Would this help be accessible to local parks, restaurants, area businesses, as well as places of work? And we had a lot of cultural guidance and shared values from various input within the Rochester residents in the community. We also, as the co-designers, we were able to help develop the station design principles with a lot of things like equity, accessibility, and design in mind. For the transit user experience and accessibility, we really prioritize the design for people of all abilities. I myself am a person who has dyslexia, so having those boarding stations that could announce it, having the visual components, having tactile surfaces for those who are vision impaired, and having handicap accessibility for wheelchair users and more was really important. And then just providing the feedback on transit user amenities and concept designs is what a lot of us tried to do for ourselves and within reaching out into the community. The distinct vision promoted both structure and architectural to underline the importance of the Rochester's first rapid transit. We felt this was really important too, because it was a great way to help build community support, to being able to also help those in the community identify the station, no matter the time of year and the climate, and or for those with various languages, they would be able to visually see those stations. So that was something that we really thought a lot about in the design process as cohesively as a team too. And going back to with the station design principles, for myself and a lot of others, we really took the time to input, and I really appreciated there was a lot of diverse options and opinions that were stated. And I really feel like for those who were involved, that they tried their best to definitely and did a great job of addressing equity and accessibility for those within our communities, ease of use, various ways of using the stations, making sure that they were accessible for handicap accessible, especially was really important. And as well as for safety mindedness, environmentalism, for having, it could be anything from like various plant structures for pollinators, looking into various options. And the connectivity within the communities was really addressed early on in the beginning phase. A lot of folks, and myself included, we were like, is this just the only section? Well, this is just the first part of the phase of the section of, and it's going to be a really, I think, really exciting long term. And as far as safety and comfort goes, a lot of really great thought and input was put into that, as well as addressing the year-round climate that is very unique to Minnesota between the extreme cold and the extreme heat. So with those aesthetics in mind and the sustainability, we really wanted to make sure that that was addressed as well. And as well as having the aesthetic identity, again, with myself as an artist, I really personally, and it was very well received through a lot of others in the group as well, having a lot of involvement from local artists and helping out. And when that point in time comes to that. So I'm really excited for what this holds for the future of Rochester, its residents, and how I think this will help in the long run for accessibility for moving around the city, as well as for residents that are working in diverse areas of the city. I'm good.
Thank you, Amarama. My name is Nathan Johnson. As Jared indicated earlier, I'm one of the designers, architects working on stations, particularly focused on the 7 station areas. But I'm going to talk to a lot of the architectural elements that you're going to see at the completion of this project. Part of our process was really kind of examining Rochester rapid transit line in the context of maybe some other BRT or rapid transit lines across the country, and making sure that we are giving a level or amenity level which is on par or even above that. I think there's an interest as we work through the process to provide a high quality, robust kind of transit system for the city of Rochester. So what you see on the screen are kind of 4 that we looked at, and we looked at a lot more than what's indicated here, but to give some examples of how BRT is done across the nation is where we started. So what we kind of set up as we work with the co-designers and the city of Rochester is the things that were really important in regards to the rapid transit line for Rochester was that we wanted an extended canopy that covers more than 80% of the pavement area. There was a high desire to provide a 4-sided shelter area. A lot of bus amenities or bus shelters kind of are 3-sided or maybe just have like a windscreen or something like that, but the high desire to kind of provide an environment that felt fully enclosed and available for the public to use so they could stay warm when they're waiting for the bus. But in addition to those four-sided shelters, we also identified different types of environments that people could occupy. So we actually developed the concept of what we refer to as like a booth, which is more of kind of a wind screening, but it's an individual type of space that you can be in instead of kind of a sheltered area, which is four-sided and can have a lot of people in it. And there are places to wait outside as well on the platforms. As we work with the co-designers in the city of Rochester, providing enhanced accessibility and wayfinding was critical. The recognition that the city of Rochester is kind of a destination medical center, or the destination medical center in regards to that portion of the project and the number of people maybe who have limited mobility that may want to use a transit, making sure that we're providing the most robust accommodations to them that we can. So what we did with that is we have multiple access points. We have a very clear kind of branding idea and what we refer to as the arrival beacon. And that is, it's not just visual, but it's something that could be tactical, and there's going to be sound and things like that associated with it. Also along the pavement, doing more than just kind of putting the warning edge along the border of the platform, but providing other wayfinding components within the platform so people can easily move around. And then also providing a distinct architectural concept, which is consistent through the transit system, but also has the ability to adapt and kind of reflect the community that it sits within in unique ways. So some of the final elements that you will see in the platform is the West Transit Village, 2nd Avenue, and Government Center stations. The sizing of the shelter may vary a little bit. Lots of canopy coverage was really important for us. There'll be seating and leaning rails, so different types of places to rest. One thing that was really important is we are actually integrating 2 information screen panels. One that kind of faces the transit user side, which is for people along the platform and using the transit system, but we're also adding an additional screen that faces the pedestrian side, and you'll see that when we look at the plans of the actual platform. And that screen can provide more community information that would be accessible and tell that story. Some of the accessible features, which were extraordinarily important, where we wanted to provide that tactile boarding edge, accessible boarding area floor markers, and you can kind of see that on the left photo, that kind of gray tile, which kind of differentiates between where the kind of edge is and where the bus door is. So the bus pulls up to those markers at that location. Colorful wayfinding strips, tactile floor plans, and one other thing is tactile maps. So something which is not just visual, but also tactile, that you're able to engage the station. So with all the work that we've done to date, because we've been working on this about 9 months, 10 months, maybe a little bit more, there are still things that we're still considering that are still to be determined. So we have this concept for the booth, which is kind of a more individual kind of waiting area. We're still working on the design and developing the design of that with particular interest in how do people with limited mobility kind of use that space. We're still working on the materials. We have a slide later where we kind of we provide some information on the preliminary materials. Colors are also up for grab. We're showing a fairly light gray or kind of white color in a lot of areas, but as we continue to develop the stations, that could develop. We're looking at opportunities for lighting, specifically in the context of we want a very well illuminated station area, but also providing some dynamic lighting, which can provide some visual interest at the station as well. And you will be seeing an artist call fairly shortly, which is going to identify ways that public artists from the community can engage on the continued development of the design of the platform. And some of those can include railing panels, some opportunities at the station marker, windscreen panels, and maybe even platform pavement. But that will be determined as we select the artist to participate with us on this project. So these are some preliminary images kind of which describe what the platform looks like. And what you can see, we really wanted a very clear condition that is open. As you kind of approach it, you can see the marker to the right and that screen that sits within the marker. And that's actually a two-sided screen, one that faces the walkway and then one that faces the platform. You can see a couple of the booths kind of in the foreground, and then in the background, and we'll see this in some images later, you can actually see the four-sided enclosed shelter area. you can go ahead. I'm going to talk about the materials a little bit more on a future slide. So one slide show the first that slide previously showed kind of the approach. This shows what it may look like if you're experiencing sitting on the platform or standing on the platform waiting for the bus, what this may look like. And you can see the booths in the foreground. There's a guardrail which separates the pedestrian traffic from the transit user traffic. And we kind of have this interesting wood ceiling that is kind of continuing to develop that will integrate lighting into it. What you see in front of you now is the plan. So in this case, this is showing a eastbound station where you see the bus that's where it will park. And then you see the gray warning mats that tell you exactly where those bus doors are. So the bus is a 60-foot articulated bus, and you'll enter it on 3 doors. The way that the rapid transit line is structured is you prepay before you get on it to kind of speed up boarding and to speed up kind of the flow of the actual bus. To the right is where you see that 4-sided completely enclosed shelter there on that should be a nice warm environment during kind of winter months. But then you can also wait in the platform area as well. So in the sun and things like that is also available for you. Some key amenities that you'll see is there will be landscaping kind of integrated around the shelter areas. Each site will be adapted according to its location, but you can see some green patches, at least in the prototype to the right of the station. You can go to the next slide. So some of our preliminary materials that we're kind of considering. So in this image, you see a pretty good view of what that tall marker looks like. Right now, that's about 25 feet tall. As you approach the station, it should be available. It's a 3-dimensional object, so it will be highlighted from all 4 sides that you'll have access to it. Is the intent with a lot of information available at the base and some opportunities for integrating a decorative component or an artistic component within that marker, which is kind of a screen kind of halfway up. There's a lot of concrete. We're gonna vary kind of the color of the concrete between platform and a curb that you'll see along the back edge. Other things that you'll see are kind of tactile paths and warning strips that are available, and then door warning mats as well that I mentioned earlier. What we're looking at, which is indicated number 2, is a wood ceiling. And what we're looking at in the wood ceiling is providing some locally or regional wood materials. So we've identified kind of thermally modified ash and a black locust are kind of hardwoods, which stand up well to little harsher environments from a wood standpoint, but are also kind of available within this region. So, the last thing I'll mention is just kind of the edging, where one of the things we do want to create a high quality station and using high quality materials. That's the idea with the wood. We're also looking at the edging of the canopy right now to be what's called a tin copper, which is a more natural finish than like a kind of what you'll see on a lot of metal flashing on buildings. We know kind of walking through and experiencing Rochester that there's some really beautiful high quality materials used on buildings, and we want that to be reflected in the stations and the station concept. You can go to the next slide. So before we go into the adaptation at each station area, I know there's been a couple questions that are available.
Yes. This would be the time that if you have a question, that you can go ahead and raise your hand, and we will recognize you, and you can ask your question live over the meeting, and we'll also try to answer any questions that get typed on in here at this session. We do have a couple of individuals with their hand raised, and I will start with Jeremy. Jeremy, give us a second to unmute your mic or to allow you to speak, and then you need to unmute your mic and you should be able to ask your question. It looks like you're able to go.
Hey, yes. So I was wondering, so I know you showed us some of the designs of what it will look like. Do you guys have more visuals of that? Also, I just want to make sure I heard right. There's going to be 7 to 11 stops every 15 minutes, and you guys are expecting 11,000 people to ride in spring 2025?
Yes. Most of those numbers you just said are correct. We actually have, it's a little confusing because we have 7 stops. So there's 7 dots on that map. But what ends up being is 11 platforms. So 11 different stations that you'll see. So yes, here in the few minutes, We will walk you through many of the key stations and what they will look like, and how we even have them kind of in 3D settings of what they will look like with their rounding, their settings. So we'll take a look at those more here in a second. But otherwise, yes, your numbers are dead on there. Moving on, let's go to Barry. Was the next individual I saw had to raise his hand. Barry, it looks like you're free to unmute your mic and ask your question.
Yes, okay. When I was in Minneapolis, I noticed that it was sometimes hard to get the tickets out of the where you actually get the ticket dispenser. So I was just wondering how that was going to work, because I just found that people would rush for the train there, and they just missed the train, and they would be fumbling to get the tickets. So I'm just wondering exactly the mechanics of that. And as a part of that question, Mayor Norton at the last city council meeting said that there may not be any fares because the vast majority of riders would be Mayo staff. Could you clarify if the expectation is that most of the riders would be Mayo staff, and also exactly what you're going to do in terms of ticket dispensing if you actually do the actual tickets and not free fares?
Thank you, Barry. Yes, as someone who has also ridden the light rail in the Twin Cities and has experience with their ticketing process and their ticketing booths, I would say I've had my own personal experiences and troubles with that myself. But in short, at this time, we don't know. We are planning to offer systems like that at our platforms and stations. But what actual company and system we go with are still to be determined. As far as the question of the fare free question, we as a design team are proceeding as if the system that a rider will have to pay for the system, and we will make sure to work closely with our policymakers, including the mayor, to work through that process of determining if we want to offer free fares to everyone. And yes, Barry, the kind of the third question you did ask there is of that 11,000 riders that when we open up in 2025, a large portion of them are expected to be Mayo employees, but you know what the right number is, what percentage of that, I don't have that in front of me right now, but yes, a large portion will be downtown employees, with Mayo being the emphasis of those. Joel was the next person to ask a question. Joel, give us a second to recognize you. It looks like Alicia's might be struggling here for a second.
I am actually not able to allow Joel to talk. It looks like Joel is using an older version of Zoom. So Joel, if you're able to just go ahead and submit your question via the Q&A box, then we can answer it there.
Yeah, and sorry about that, Joel, and we'll continue to answer your questions via the text and the Q&A box. Eileen, you're up next, and you should be able to unmute your mic now. No. Eileen did type in a question into the Q&A box, so I'll take a stab at trying to answer the question that was put into the Q&A box. The first question was only one ticket vending spot per station. Some of our lighter stations probably will only have one opportunity. Our larger stations, such as at St. Mary's and at Second and Second, probably will have multiple ways to purchase tickets. And yes, we would be offering multi-ride tickets as part of that system if we do have a fare as part of it. Joel asked a really nice question here about art and how it might work on with stations. and how it might work with the Mayo Clinic. And yeah, I would agree that we are looking to work in when we do the artist call and work with the artist to how to work into each station, make each station a little bit differently, and how that might work in with some of them more Mayo locations. With that, we're getting a little behind time, so I'm going to pass it off to Nathan so he can continue moving forward.
Thank you, Jarrett. So what we wanted to spend some time is looking now, we kind of have the prototype that we developed and looking at how that adapts at each station site. So we're going to walk through, I think, the majority of station sites, not all of them, but quite a few of them in regards to how the station adapts at each one of those locations. So starting on the western end of the transit line, we're going to look at 19th Avenue. And so you can see what the existing conditions look at both the eastbound and westbound locations. There's an existing spot or stop actually at the, existing bus stop at the eastbound station that will be taken over by the BRT platform. You can go to the next slide. So one of the unique things at 19th Avenue, which is substantively different than any other station, is there's the bike corridor that supports this area. And so we have to accommodate that bike corridor and how the stations work. So in this concept, what happens is we take the prototype, we place it kind of in an island with the bike corridor running behind the station so that it doesn't conflict with the bus. But we also have to provide very good pedestrian access. And you can kind of see how the pedestrian access will cross that bike corridor in two spots to get to the sidewalk. You can go to the next slide. And then what this does is it shows what that will look like in regards to our station as it sits in that kind of island on the other side of the bike corridor. You can see that the marker is something which is a really strong kind of iconic piece that really kind of grabs that condition. And the idea with the marker is that it is an object that can be seen on all four sides because people may be approaching from different directions. And you can see that in this space in 19th Avenue, you have a transit space, you have a bike space, and you have a pedestrian space. It's all accommodated and very functional. You can go to the next slide. So at the St. Mary's Transit Center, I'm going to start, I believe this is the transit center side. There's a station that is eastbound on the hospital side, and there's a station that is westbound, kind of where the commercial buildings are, and it's going to take over the site of Cafe Presto. And in addition to having a station or a platform there to load the bus, there's also going to be a transit center kind of integrated at this location with a tunnel and an elevator, which allows you to cross over to the St. Mary's Hospital. You can go to the next slide. So from a plan standpoint, you can see the organization of the plan and the site. St. Mary's Hospital is on the bottom of the page, and then the commercial businesses kind of are on the top of the page, which is north. There's a platform and a local spot and a local stop going eastbound that you can see kind of on the bottom of the street, the 2nd Street. And then on the top, on the north portion of 2nd Street, you can see where the St. Mary's Transit Center, there's going to be a large canopy which comes out and covers the platform. And there will also be accommodations for a local stop at this location as well that you see indicated there to the west. You can go to the next slide. So this shows a concept for how the station prototype will adapt into the eastbound station. So very much kind of in line with the station that we had looked at other locations. The one thing that's different here, and this is going to happen at kind of historic locations where the marker, which is about 25 feet tall in the majority of the locations, we're shrinking it here because of the historic property behind, which is a St. Mary's, but it's still something that will be kind of a beacon or something which is iconic that can draw people to the station site. It's a wayfinding device, and it will still integrate these digital screens that allow people to get information both from a transit experience and from a pedestrian experience will be available at this station location. All right, you can go to the next slide. This shows the eastbound platform kind of further along or further east, and you can see the BRT kind of a little bit further in the image, and the foreground shows some initial concepts for what a local stop could look like that would have some similar look to the BRT concept, but would be different in regards to how it works. All right, you can go to the next slide. This is the design for the transit center. So the transit center is going to have a uniquely different design because it is kind of an iconic piece within the city is the idea. It's going to stitch itself and create this beautiful public park, kind of pocket park that's available to the community, but also provide a way for you to go from the street from that on the westbound side, go down into a tunnel and be able to access St. Mary's Hospital. You can go ahead to the next slide. This is a plan of that. So you can see where the entry is to the transit center. It's not a very large facility, but the intent of it is primarily for commuters to kind of be able to get on and off the bus fairly quickly with the recognition that bus service is fairly frequent at this location. But in addition to kind of creating this kind of small pavilion type of building, it creates a great public amenity for the city at this location that can be a place of respite or just enjoyment that you can have no matter if you're a business or someone who's using the St. Mary's Hospital as well. Go to the next one. So this shows some interior images. I think there's an opportunity. This is a really beautiful space. You can see, even though it's not very large, very glassy, some high quality materials that will be integrated in. And this even kind of hints at the fact you have kind of this outdoor kind of plaza garden space, but we can bring some of the greenery even inside this building as well. You can go to the next slide. And this just is another interior image a little bit further away that talks about how this architecture is developing. You can go ahead, that's fine. You can go to the next one. So this is kind of an image showing what that outdoor plaza space could look like. So you can see the bus kind of in the background there pulling up, and the canopy, which kind of sits over the top of that transit center. And then just creating kind of this great public amenity for the city in this area will be a great resource with trees and pavement and sitting areas and bike parking and scooter parking as well, which I don't know if it's illustrated quite here yet, but there would be an opportunity to even do scooter parking within this plaza. You can go to the next slide. All right, so continuing to move east, we're at 6th Avenue here. And on the left, you see the eastbound platform. And on the right, you see kind of the westbound platform. And this is actually, we were in Rochester, was it 2 weeks ago, a little over 2 weeks ago, and that building is much more developed than this image shows kind of on the right. But well, to kind of imagine how that station would integrate there, I think our rendering is actually of the eastbound platform, because that building, at least when we started the design, wasn't quite as far along in construction as it is now. You can go ahead to the next slide, Lisa. So this shows the plan concept where that kind of prototypical station that we looked at early on would fit within the public right of way on the sidewalk side, both at the westbound and eastbound. And you can kind of see the access points both at the end and kind of middle platform and then into the shelter as well. You go to the next slide. And so this shows how that prototypical station, it actually works really good at this location. There's a parking lot behind, but you can see the marker, as we refer to it, well illuminated, kind of showing where the entry to that station is. There's the booth, and then there's that four-sided shelter kind of on the left in this image. And you can see multiple access points in and out of the station area, both along the sidewalk, but then at the approach side, kind of close to the marker. You can go along to the next one. So 2nd Avenue Station, so close to Mayo campus. One is in front of the Mayo building and one is in front of the Hilton building. So let me get my directions right. Eastbound is in front of the Hilton building, and then westbound platform is in front of the Mayo building. What that will require is one of those custom shelters that you all had done a few years ago will have to be relocated to a different location to accommodate kind of the BRT concept. You can go ahead to the next one. And so you can see in plan what's going on there, where the Mayo building is and the Hilton building. And the one unique thing about, there's a recognition at 2nd Avenue that we're probably going to have very high ridership, probably the highest ridership along the transit line. So we did expand the platform here, where a typical platform is 10 feet deep. At the Mayo station, we increased the depth of it to be 13 feet. And we were very conscious about still creating a great public kind of pedestrian way behind the station, because there's a lot of foot traffic in here, but also getting a platform which is robust in regards to recognition that a lot of people are going to be waiting here. So you'll see in large shelter areas at this platform than what we've seen at the prototype. So you can go ahead and go to the next slide. So this shows kind of how this integrates. So you can see we still have the four-sided enclosed platform to the left. And instead of the booth concept that you'll see at some of the other station areas, we integrated just basically another shelter area that people can use to provide a little bit more comfort, because we do anticipate having higher ridership at this station. Much like the St. Mary station, you'll see that we show a shorter marker concept, recognizing that this is kind of in a more historic area of the city. You can go to the next slide. And so this shows a quick image, still developing of the lighting. We anticipate that the lighting levels will be a lot higher once we get into the final imaging of this and studying kind of foot candle levels, but it kind of gives that contrast between what a dark environment may look like, and the idea that the station is going to be well illuminated beyond what the street lights will provide. You can go ahead to the next slide. And then this shows the opposite side, so the westbound platform in front of the Mayo building. As indicated previously, the marker is a little bit shorter here, maybe 10 to 12 feet shorter than it is at the other locations. But this is still very much that same concept where we have these expanded shelter areas along the platform, which are bigger than the booths because of the high ridership that we anticipate accommodating at this location. You can go to the next slide. And then this shows that nighttime image, again, very similar to what you saw on the eastbound platform. So I believe we have two more station areas that we're going to look at. So at Civic Center, so close to the library and Civic Center, you can see what that physical environment looks like. It should have a pretty good connection to the Riverwalk, which is kind of a great space to kind of enjoy and recreate. So you can go on to the next one. And this is one of those locations, and Jared alluded to this before, where at the majority of the stations, we have platforms both going east and west. At the next two stations, at Civic Center and Government Center, the platforms only go one direction because the transit line moves in a loop. So this will kind of go west, but then it will start turning and go south, and then kind of loop back around onto Broadway and go back onto 2nd Street. So this is one of those single platform locations that you see here. And basically this platform is going to be an extension of kind of that public space, that beautiful public space that you already have here that kind of connects down to the river. You can go on to the next one, Alicia. And so this shows kind of the concept for how this integrates in. So we would have a tall marker at this location to really kind of create kind of this iconic piece of the station, identify it, and then how this sits kind of within this environment with the booths, and then the shelter area kind of on the far side of the platform. You go to the next one. And so the last station that we're going to discuss is the Government Center station, and that's kind of located on the south side, I believe, of the Government Center. And you can kind of see what that environment looks like. Just like at Civic Center, this station only goes one direction because it's part of the loop. You can go to the next slide. And so one of the things, and you can see kind of they're going to create a median kind of in the middle of the street to kind of create a more pedestrian friendly environment. And the station sits there on the north side of the street, 4th Street in this instance. This is the more kind of traditional prototypical station type, where you can see the access points at the end where it says "be there," and then there's another access point along the sidewalk in the middle. We can go ahead to the next one. And so this shows how this sits within that kind of station concept. You can see the Government Center behind, and kind of the prototypical station kind of fitting kind of nicely into this environment, and that full kind of shelter concept on one end, the booths in the middle, and then providing these different types of spaces in between that people can wait for the bus. Next slide. And I will pass it off to Jared.
Thank you, Nathan. And I can tell you, you did a wonderful job, because we had very few questions today being typed in the box, but we're going to get back to if folks have questions here in a second. So if you want to go ahead and raise your hands and start putting them in the chat so that we can get those queued on up, ready to go. Just to recap here, we did take a look at the project overview, the general what the project includes. We are looking at the inclusion of public art as part of the stations. And as you saw, Nathan went through very nicely the station design and kind of what that typical 10 by 80 foot long platform would look like, and how that would incorporate with some of the facilities in and around the station locations. So moving forward, we will be doing that artist call and looking forward for information and the public's help on that art piece as well. Let me just recap again what is still open to be looked at. Once again, we would love to take public input on that booth concept that we have, that individual enclosed area for individuals. We are going to still some work on the materials that we finalized. Nathan talked really nicely about the colors that we are proposing right now, but we will adjust the colors because slightly, because the city of Rochester is going through a process to create a unique brand and logo and colors for downtown rapid transit. And so hopefully in the next couple of months, we'll be able to start to show some changes that correspond to that brand. And then finally, the elements that we involve artists include railing panels, like you can see here in this image, that station identification of that marker, the windscreen or the shelter panels and the platform pavement, and then also enhance the lighting as well. Let's see here. Questions. Now time for some questions. I honestly I guess someone answered that question. All right, let's go back to Barry. So Alicia, if you could allow Barry to unmute his mic, and Barry.
Yeah, I was just wondering, I'm a little concerned about the getting from the stop at the government center to the government center itself. I don't know if you've considered bridges or some kind of a way across the street other than actually physically having to cross the street, because that area is a little bit difficult. So I'm just wondering if you've considered that at all. I know that would add a little bit to the cost, but I'm just wondering how exactly people would get across the street from the bus to the government center.
Yes, thank you, Barry. We actually, I don't know if Alicia can roll back to that slide real quick, but what I believe Barry's referring to is at the government center station, since it's just the one platform headed westbound. We are expecting people to get back and forth across 4th Street. And right now, 4th Street is a 4-lane roadway that is even wider with parking. So we will be eliminating some of that parking. And so you can see in this image that we pulled back up some of the enhancements that we've started talking about to try to help people get across the street. You know, the first element is creating that median, that rest area in between on the roadway. So that's one element. Trying to shorten that distance by eliminating parking at the corners of those intersections. That will help. We are in conversations and have talked a little bit about what's known as those push button activated signals at this location. It's a little hard because it is so close to 3rd Avenue for those to really work at this location. So we'll continue to discuss that. And also I should say that that Olmsted County is doing a lot of work right now to develop that annex building that is on the south side. And they have some conversations going on, and should be coming to the county commission, hopefully in the next year or so, of developing a enclosed skyway across from the government center across to that annex building. And so we will continue to look at ways to do that at more of a skyway or a bridge approach, as Barry mentioned. I see Kurt has raised his hand. Alicia, can you take a second to allow Kurt to ask his question?
Okay. Okay, and of course I do have a question. And I'm considering the sites for the stations, and How long will, of course, no, I rephrased that question. One is, of course, I'm considering the locations of the stations. It comes to my attention, and will the buses be, of course, and then diesel or electric? That is my question. Thank you.
Thank you, Kurt. The buses are planned to be electric. They're going to be, that's another element of the system that we are looking forward to. They will be, we're anticipating longer buses than our normal 40-foot our Rochester public transit buses. So there'll be 60-foot long buses that we are planning to be electric. They will have 3 doors, so quicker on and off of the bus. And
Interesting.
trying to think, I forgot what my last point there. There was a question that was typed in the chat here about elevator and escalators at the St. Mary Transit Center. Right now for that St. Mary's Transit Center, we are looking at on the north side, it will be stairs and an elevator on the north side to get you on down to the tunnel, to get you underneath 2nd Street. Right now, making that connection on the south side of the street to St. Mary's, we are in close negotiations and conversations with Mayo about how they would prefer that access come on into their building. We are looking at definitely an elevator elevator is one option, stairs for sure, and we've also talked ramp, a switchback ramp as another alternative to be out there to get you into St. Mary's. But like I said, some of that is up to for Mayo to decide how that will look like on the south side of the street. I see Eileen has raised her hand again. Can we give that a shot again to ask your question live?
I think I just forgot the question. Okay, we're talking about the buses. Shoot, I forgot. I'll have to raise my hand later. It took so long, and I should have written it down. Sorry.
No biggie. Thanks for giving it a try. We appreciate that.
Say, Jared.
Yes,
if
go
you
ahead.
If you wanted to address that one question that was answered in the chat, I believe it was Jamie asked if all of 2nd Street is moving from 2 lanes to 4 lanes. So I think that's a common question. So if you wanted to kind of take that one, maybe others share that question.
Yeah, thank you, Nick. And let me first introduce Nick Lemmer, Communications Director for Rochester Public Transit, has also been joining us on the call, trying to answer several of these questions. So the question that coming on in is the number of lanes in the corridor. Right now, for most of the corridor, it is 4 general purpose lanes, so 2 lanes in each direction. The plan is to go ahead and utilize the outside lane for what is known as bus access transit lane, or for in short, transit preferred, so that we would hopefully the transit would be the preference in those lanes. I say preference on purpose because the public will still be able to utilize those outside lanes to make right-hand turns into side streets, businesses, and other accesses. So yes, with those transit preferred lanes, we'll be going from 4 to 2 general purpose lanes in most of the corridor. The one exception to that, and that was part of our traffic webinar, so if you want to go to our website and watch the traffic webinar, is in between US 52 and 14th Avenue. Our traffic modeling that we conducted for the entire project and for most of the area, the corridor area around 2nd Street downtown, shows that traffic in that area, particularly at the peak times, will not be able to be handled with 1 lane. So there will be no transit preferred lanes between that 16th or between 14th Avenue and US Highway 52.
Jared, another question has come in from Paul Krog saying, what is the peak capacity of the system of the 11,000 riders per day? How many trips are expected in a peak hour like 8 a.m. or 7 a.m. to 8 a.m.?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't have those numbers right in front of me, so I'm gonna have to try to flub this one a little bit and say We are expecting, one of the reasons why we are utilizing the longer, bigger buses, the 60-foot long buses, is because we are expecting a high demand of travelers and users of the system between 6:30 and about 7:30 in the morning as people arrive to get downtown for work. Because of the high demand that we will have in those time periods. So I can't at the moment remember what those numbers were. I will say we're looking at, in that kind of that peak time in the morning, we are looking at trying to serve a few thousand in those peak hours.
See, Eileen has her hand up again, so I'm going to allow her to talk.
Thank you, Alicia.
Okay, this time I wrote it down, so I remembered. My question was, is, even though there are 3 doors to enter and et cetera, is there going to be some kind of like scan method to scan tickets to make sure that people don't jump on without tickets? Or how is it going to be kind of an honor system? We're going to just assume that you bought a ticket, or like with the transit system in the cities, they actually kind of warn you that, hang on to your ticket, they could randomly ask you for your ticket.
Yeah, that's a very good question. If we do have a payment system, it will be. We hope to offer, in general, a similar experience to what you see on the light rail in the Twin Cities. So yes, if you buy a ticket, you would walk on and make sure you have that with you, and we would have to, and that's one of those elements that we're still working with, and why the fare-free option is really more of a policy decision instead of an operations decision. Is one of those elements is we would need to figure out, just like the light rail in the Twin Cities, if we do that, what the enforcement may look like, and how that would cost into the equation as well. But yes, in general, the idea is to buy your ticket before you get on, so you can board at any of the 3 doors. And it makes boarding much quicker and much more efficient. All right. I'll start closing up our session here for the noon hour by saying thank you again for everyone attending. I really appreciate your attendance and all these great questions. Like I said, we've been doing these webinars monthly. Our next one is scheduled for June 29th. That's Tuesday, June 29th. Once again, noon and 5 o'clock. And the focus will be reviewing some of the information that we've collected as part of the environmental process, and where we stand in that process as we move through that. As I said at the very early beginning, we are expecting and hoping and applying for the Federal Transit Administration, FTA, for 49% of funds for the system. So going through the Federal Transit Administration process, we have to go through what is known as a formal environmental process. And so next month, we'll be taking a look at those elements that are part of that, and what some of our early findings are, that we'll be talking through that. As always, you can always, if you got between our webinars, if you got questions and comments, you can always hit us up on our email or phone number. I'll go through in a second. But to the comment that was on the slide, we do on our webpage, www.rochester.gov/rapid transit. On that webpage, you can find what's known as a wiki map, which will upload a map, and you can go ahead and submit whatever questions you want to on that map, so that we can see your thoughts and comments for the entire corridor. Again, other than the Rapid Transit webpage, we do have the email account. That's just rapidtransit@rochestermm.gov. And then the phone number for the project is 507-328-2025. I'll say that again, 507-328-2025. Once again, rochestermm.gov/rapid transit for the webpage. One last time, I will thank everyone for attending and all the great questions. Look forward to seeing you next month, and would like to say a special thank you for Nathan for his element of the presentation today, and most importantly, Amarama for her involvement, or for Amarama's involvement in the co-design process, and all the work that the co-design did to get us to this point through the station, and particularly Amarama participating in this presentation. I appreciate you very much. Thank you. With that said, I'll say it all. I'll say goodbye to everyone for today.